the inappropriate comments.
Never did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news.
Opening night of the UK leg of Taylor Swift's £1 billion grossing tour.
I love you, ain't that the worst thing you ever heard? Such is the spending power of Swifties that her 15 UK shows are projected to boost the economy, thank you very much, by almost £1 billion.
You slay Taylor, we love you, Taylor!
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Christina Patterson and political and PR consultant Leon Emirali. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, 5 years on since the first lockdown, the Observer reports Britons are amongst the hardest hit by the COVID fallout. On the front of the Mirror, an exclusive report that says Labour is about to crack down on antisocial behaviour, with jobs facing jail time and bans from city centres under new laws set to be announced this week. There are claims a Russian spy master plotted to use mercenaries to control migration into Europe. That's on the front of the Telegraph. The Times leads on an investigation that has found that defence companies supplying weapons for the British military are being attacked and sabotaged by pro-Palestine activists. The group Palestine Action has claimed responsibility for 356 direct actions since 2020. The Sunday Express has an exclusive investigation that claims taxpayers shelled out £6.6 billion on asylum seeker and refugee support schemes. On the front of the Sun, Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher is embroiled in a new court battle with the mother of his love child, who is claiming child support from the star. Brits are apparently buying telescopes at a rapid rate as interest in other planets and aliens soars. That's on the front of the surprise of the star. I was thinking, is that a surprise story in the Star? Anyway, we are joined tonight by journalist and author Christina Patterson and political and PR consultant Leon Emirali. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the front page of the Telegraph and the reform story, the political story that reform seems to be imploding, infighting, not exactly the look they were going for. Christina.
Well, it's not too much of a surprise that two gargantuan egos have clashed. And these are men who love attention. One of them is extremely famous and very big on TikTok and big, has been a big sort of reality TV star, Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe, not so much, though he clearly puts himself in that category. And yeah, so there have been clashes between them because Rupert Lowe criticised Farage for his leadership style and talked about Reform in an interview this week as being the party of protest with a messiah, which I think is not an inaccurate description of Reform, actually. I think it is a party of protest, and I think Nigel Farage is a kind of messianic figure without anything much in the way of policies. You know, he's charismatic, he's very good at channeling people's anger and discomfort, and he's turned that into a brand. And
would you say it's still a party of protest with 5 MPs? Well, actually 4 now without Rupert Lowe.
Yes, well, I think it's a party of protest rather than policies. I mean, clearly it has got 4 MPs now, as you say, and it has increased its membership a lot. But I think what it doesn't have is a coherent programme for government, and that's the hallmark of populist movements, that they are generally about protest, they're about dissatisfaction, but they're not really about solutions. And in this case, what's happened is that Farage has therefore gone public with the fact that Rupert Lowe has been accused of bullying members of staff and has also threatened violence against Reform's chair. So it's all gone very ugly, and has referred Rupert Lowe to the police.
Rupert Lowe, meanwhile, saying that it's completely baseless and, in fact, lies have been used against him, denying everything.
Well, I mean, he would do, I guess, and the allegations are serious, so let's hope that investigation happens and it takes its course. But you know, Rupert Lowe, as Christina alluded to, is not this household figure, but online, on Twitter in particular, on X, he is hugely popular. I think he's a fan, or Elon Musk is a fan of his, and I do think that Rupert Lowe's tweets get sort of boosted in the algorithm, as it were, by Elon Musk. So, you know, he pops up in my feed a lot of the time as well. And I do think that perhaps Nigel Farage is slightly concerned about the role that Rupert Lowe might play and the popularity he does have with that online component of Reform's support. I don't think that necessarily translates into the real world offline, and I think that's what Farage is very good at as a politician. Like him or loathe him, he does have a sense of where the British public are at, and I think what he's trying to do is shore up his own position. But you're right, ego is at the heart of this, and I think what the best thing could have happened for Reform is it was Nigel Farage elected and 4 nobodies, people who've never heard of before, you know, yes men and women who wouldn't have said boo to a goose and certainly wouldn't have said boo to Nigel Farage. And I think now we are starting to see it explode in his face, and I think it isn't much of a surprise to people who've been looking in. It is a surprise, perhaps, that it's taken such a short period of time for them to implode.
OK, let's move on to another story also on the front page of The Telegraph, and this is following on from the Russian spy ring, the sentencing we saw last week. This is the plot to use the migration of immigrants as a weapon of war, a tool against Europe, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's a horrible story, and what we've been seeing, you know, Trump's support for Putin, the more we hear about what Putin is doing covertly in Europe and all over the shop, but particularly in Europe, the more disgusting it is. And to use some of the most desperate people in the world as a weapon of war, which is essentially what the plan has been, Jan Marsalek, who was the boss of Wirecard, which was Germany's equivalent of PayPal. The company was discredited. He has escaped on a private jet, and he's now a fugitive. But he apparently had a private army, not unlike the Wagner Group. He had a private jet. He had all kinds of influence, and his plan was to be controlling migration from Libya, which is a place where many migrants start their journey, or start the African part of their journey to Europe, and cause massive disruption. And as we know, I mean, Nigel Farage himself channeled the migrant issue, and in particular the issue in Germany, to get to the result of Brexit that he wanted. And it is, the horrible truth is that migration is a weapon of disruption, and it's being used by Putin to provide instability. And his great hope is to destabilise Europe. He's done a fantastic job in America. He's got Trump captive, which is already having catastrophic effects in Ukraine, which could well ripple much further across Europe. So it's very, very worrying.
Leon, the thought is to use migration as an issue in elections. It's something that people feel very strongly about, and if you can skewer that, then you can really throw elections and have an influence on them. That's the thinking behind it.
Well, it's a tool of division, isn't it? And that is Russia's strategic aim, is to divide the West. And, you know, migration is one of those divisive issues. We're seeing it in elections throughout Europe, in the US as well. So there's no doubt that is having a great deal of success in Russia's sense. And I think we see it in so many different spheres that Russia are seeking to seed division. They are seeking to break up NATO, to break up the European Union, to break up the alliance between the US and Europe. And they seem to be making a pretty good job of it. And I think it's time for the West to wake up to that, to understand what Russia are doing, to understand it is a nefarious actor at play here, and to try and wise up to it and not let it sow that division. But ultimately, migration is a divisive political issue, and Russia know that.
Christina, take us to The Observer, 5 years on since COVID, and analysis that's been interpreted by The Observer suggesting that Britons are amongst the hardest hit by the COVID fallout, performed worse than most other developed nations in response to the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, this is a sad story, but one I'm not very surprised by, because it's already been clear that on the health front, that for whatever complicated reasons, the after effects of COVID in the British population in terms of employment, people who've been on benefits, who are now on benefits, is significantly higher than in any other European country. And it's, you know, we all remember the clapping the NHS and Boris Johnson claiming, you know, enormous victories on every front, even while he was holding his secret lockdown parties. But it's very sad, because we spent more, apparently, on looking after people during COVID, but we've had fewer people go back to work. And if those people who are now on sickness benefits were in the workforce, then obviously that would go some way to solving our economic problems as a country, because, you know, clearly we do have, you know, this black hole that Labour keep alluding to, which is not fictional. And it's clearly also, it's much, much better for people, particularly young people, to get into the workforce and have a functional life and a sense of purpose. And I think it's incredibly sad that we have essentially parked so many people on benefits instead of tackling the root causes, helping to address people's anxiety and supporting them into employment.
The article suggesting that we haven't seen the bounce back that the other countries have. So as well as, you know, performing really badly post-COVID, we just haven't seen those results.
Yeah, we haven't. And, you know, I think there's probably a zoom out here to look at as well, which is Brexit was also impacting the UK during that period. So there's the economic impact of that perhaps was hidden by COVID initially, and now we're seeing the economic impact of that. But I think that actually Britain's response, it says there that we spent the most despite higher spending, and that's part of the reason I think, well, we struggled to bounce back in economic terms certainly, but also in those other terms, because we drove inflation by putting thousands of pounds and hundreds of pounds in people's pockets when it wasn't needed, perhaps with schemes like furlough and a lot of corruption in terms of businesses taking advantage of it. And I think that fueled inflation, and that's why we struggled to bounce back quite so quickly.
OK, Leon and Christina, thank you both. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Times. Their headline, King's Fear over Canada and US. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's a Premier League weekend on NBC and Peacock. March 8, top four hopefuls, Aston Villa. Visit Brentford.
Oh, wow!
Then March 9, it's a blockbuster battle. Arsenal.
That's done it! Just what Arsenal needed!
Visit bitter rivals, Manchester United. The Premier League weekend is on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky Security and Defence Editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, journalist and author Christina Patterson and political and PR consultant Leon Emirali. Let's take a look, first of all, in this section at the front of the Times. And we read that the King is worried about the discord between Canada and the United States of America. And this is following on from Donald Trump declaring that Canada should be the 51st state of the United States of America and insisting on referring to Justin Trudeau as a governor. Christina.
Well, I mean, I think they said the King is said to be concerned about the discord between Canada and the United States, which, you know, I think the official word in terms of English literary criticism is litotes, which is incredible understatement. I mean, basically, Trump, who appears to be a maniac, actually, there isn't really any other word for it, has...
That's not fact, by the way.
That
is definitely opinion.
Well, I would say it was fact, but anyway, the awful, tragic thing is, I think this did start off as a joke. I think he made a joke about Canada becoming the 51st state of America, and then it suddenly struck him that this would be a great idea. And people thought he was joking, but Justin Trudeau ended up in tears after his phone call with Trump the other day. Melanie Joly, their very, very impressive foreign secretary, I'm not sure what they call her, but equivalent, has given an interview in today's Times and was talking about it on Wednesday on Newsnight earlier this week. Trump is absolutely serious, and or he seems to be absolutely serious. He's certainly speaking to Canada's Prime Minister as if he was serious, and members of the government, and his turbulence on the tariff front seems to be designed to break Canada's economy. And now he's talking about moving the borders and taking over the Great Lakes. I mean, it's gone way beyond a joke, if it ever was a joke. So for the king, who not only has to host this maniac at the Buckingham Palace in a desperate bid to save Ukraine from Putin, which tragically doesn't look as if that's going to happen, but let's just hope and pray that it does, now has to, and the king is, of course, also King of Canada, has to be polite to this man who is threatening territories all over the place and essentially, and it seems to be in cahoots with Putin, very much in cahoots with Putin, is causing death in Ukraine at the moment by withdrawing intelligence from Ukraine and withdrawing military support. And poor Prince King Charles has to be polite to this man, as does every politician who is trying to conduct diplomacy at the moment. It is a tragedy.
But Leon, obviously the king is taking this very seriously by commenting and you know, passing judgment about his fears re the relationship.
Yeah, and I guess he has to, because this is unprecedented. I mean, Canada and US are traditionally the closest of allies. I do disagree with you, Christina, to some degree. I don't think Trump is that serious about this. I think that, you know, his modus operandi and his priority is to entertain. It is not to govern. And I think once you get that into our sense with Trump, that this is something that keeps him in the news, keeps him of interest, and I think that's what's going on here. Would he take Canada? Yes, I'm sure he would. Is it likely to happen? No, because I mean, you know, how on earth can that happen feasibly without some sort of military intervention, which would just be bonkers? And if that does happen, then yes, he is a maniac entirely. But I don't think Trump's necessarily entirely serious, and I do think the king has a role to play, because we saw how Trump reacted when he got that letter from the Prime Minister inviting him to come and visit the king. And I think the king obviously has influence, and hopefully he'll use that influence to say, listen, just calm it down a little bit with the rhetoric, because it's not helping us.
Yeah, and the king's going to use his Commonwealth Day message to call on all nations to come together in spirit of support and friendship, hoping that US and Canada listen to that. Other story, just quickly, on the front of the Sunday Times also, this plan to axe failing civil servants. Ministers are going to make it easier to sack bad civil servants.
Yeah, well, I mean, the civil service has grown enormously. It's now more than 500,000. And you know, there are many, many brilliant civil servants, and there are some who aren't quite so good. And overall, I'm sure there are efficiencies to be made. And Pat McFadden, who will be spearheading this, has talked about bringing in much more of a kind of tech startup approach, where not exactly move fast and break things, one hopes, but just being a bit more speedy about things. The civil service famously does act quite slowly, and so I think the idea will be that those civil servants who are, and you know, people are not, their performance isn't necessarily measured all that rigorously, and I think people who are not performing so well will apparently be offered incentives to leave, and I don't disagree with that.
Well, the civil service has an annual salary bill of $16.6 billion and a workforce, as you say, of over 500,000. We must leave it there for the moment. Christina and Leon, thank you very much. We'll see you at the top of the 11. Let's take a look at the weather for you in the meantime.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, tomorrow will stay mild for most, but it will start to turn colder from the north on Monday, with some wintry showers likely. There'll be a chilly, although largely frost-free start, but it will be fine for most. There'll be just a few fog patches over northern parts and some showery outbreaks for the far north. The morning will stay mostly dry, with plenty of spring sunshine after any early fog lifts, but the Northern Isles will be wet and increasingly windy. It'll be very mild again, but breezy in the south. The far north of mainland Scotland will see showery outbreaks edging in later. Cornwall may catch a few showers too, but most other places look dry and sunny into the evening. Monday will be cloudier than recently, with patchy, mainly light rain, then showers sinking south across Scotland.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the continuing protest at Westminster as the man who climbed up the clock tower which houses Big Ben shows no sign of coming down.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.